In 1985, Buffett closes the Berkshire Textile Mills, its original business now worth nothing more than its name. A year later, Berkshire hits $3,000 per share, making Warren a billionaire at the age of 56. As a side note, taking his boyhood business of selling Coke full circle, in 1988, Warren, at the age of 58, begins buying stock in Coca-Cola, eventually purchasing up to 8% of the company for $1 billion. He is now the largest shareholder of a boyhood business that, if you remembered, earned him 20% returns on his money. Note the irony and the full circle of the businesses in Warren's investment life. Coca-Cola, the Washington Post, and Geico, each experienced in his youth and owned as an adult. Full circle with ownership of a textile mill and taking the earnings and investing them in other businesses, which generate earnings to help acquire more businesses. A virtual circle. Now, the owner of over 100 diverse businesses and adding 4 to 5 more each year, and a billionaire many times over, he is known as the Sage of Omaha, the Prophet of Profit, and is studied more than any other successful financier in time, and listened to with the same degree of interest as the chairman of the Federal Reserve. He has grown sales of Berkshire Hathaway from some $40 million to over $40 billion today. Warren Buffett is undoubtedly the greatest architect of economic value ever known in a free capitalistic society. A genius born with the great luck of time and place, combining math and business skills with character traits of patience, discipline, confidence, frugality, rationality, and fierce independence. Common traits, but difficult in practice, particularly in an economic environment of commercialism and consumerism. Reaching his peak during the greatest capitalistic expansion ever known to man, with investment principles fit perfectly for all economic conditions. J.P. Morgan said the principal judgments in business are those concerning character. And Warren is a living and breathing example that you too can create wealth over a lifetime with simple methods in old economy stocks without compromising your character or your principles. The takeaway exercises for this session are to begin early, choose mentors carefully, have confidence, understand how business works, set goals, save and invest and live below your income. Read, study businesses over many decades before you invest. Be a business analyst, not a market analyst. Learn to value businesses and purchase pieces of them for below what you think they are worth. As another takeaway exercise, you might look at what points in Warren's biography that you can relate to, and maybe illuminate to yourself all of the things you did in your childhood that were enterprising, possibly a lemonade stand, and to identify the passions in yourself to create wealth, and we'll pursue those in future sessions. And make sure you choose mentors carefully, like Warren has done, and select them to guide you throughout your wealth-building endeavors. Now, in the next session, we'll ask the rhetorical question, what kind of investor are you? It was a surprise to no one that Warren reached his goal of becoming a millionaire by age 30. By 1962, the Buffett partnership, which had begun with $105,000, was now worth $7.2 million. He moved into a nearby office high-rise where he still operates today with very few employees. In the early 60s, he discovers a textile manufacturing firm based in New Bedford, Massachusetts, called Berkshire Hathaway, and begins buying the stock for $7 per share. By 1963, the Buffett partnership was its largest shareholder. After meeting with Walt personally, in 1965, Buffett begins to purchase 5% of the Walt Disney Company for $4 million. It is interesting to note that had he the money, Warren could have purchased all of Disney for $80 million. That same year, he took control of Berkshire, which will become his holding company. By age 36, Warren is worth $7 million. 1 year later, by age 37, his net worth is $10 million, and his investment partnership is now worth $65 million. Rather amazingly, at the age of 38, his partnership earns more than $40 million, bringing the total value to $104 million. In 1969, following his most successful year, Buffett closes the partnership and liquidates its $100 million assets to his partners. Among the assets paid out are shares of Berkshire Hathaway. Warren's personal stake now stands at $25 million. He is only 39 years old and owns nearly a third of Berkshire and begins writing the annual letters to shareholders. The holding company earns $45,000 from textile operations and 10 times that, or $4.7 million, in insurance, banking, and investments. This becomes a defining moment because he begins to take the earnings from his operating companies and uses the proceeds to purchase other businesses, creating a huge circle of wealth, which in essence is how he built his company to what it is today. In 1971, the NASDAQ was born starting at 100. Berkshire was then selling for $71. In 1973, with a declining stock market, Berkshire purchases and becomes the largest shareholder of the Washington Post, approximately 30 years after Warren was an independent newspaper boy. A year later, in 1974, during the oil crisis, Warren loses half of his net worth in a bear market. By 1979, with the stock market recovered, Berkshire trades at $290 per share, bringing Warren's net worth at the age of 49 to $140 million, and he is still living on a salary of $50,000 per year without ever selling a share of Berkshire or using stock options to gain more. Within 4 years, by 1983, Berkshire has $1.3 billion in its corporate stock portfolio. Berkshire begins the year at $775 per share and ends up at $1,300 per share. Warren's personal net worth is now $620 million, and he is more than halfway to becoming a billionaire. He joins the newly formed Forbes 400 richest list. In the fall, he enrolls at the University of Pennsylvania, but later transfers and graduates with a bachelor's degree from the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. As a college senior, he read The Intelligent Investor, written by his future graduate school professor and lifelong mentor, Benjamin Graham. Reading this book was like an epiphany. This was the beginning of an investment philosophy that is simply known as value investing. It can be best explained as an investment is best when it is most businesslike and without emotion, fear, or fads. By age 19, Warren's wealth was $9,800. He applies and was rejected by Harvard Business School for graduate study. This turns out to be another gift when he learns that the author of The Intelligent Investor, Graham, taught at Columbia, and he enrolled there. As good fortune would have it, Ben Graham and David Dodd are professors at Columbia and co-authors of the 735-page book Security Analysis. It's the other book recommended by Buffett for all participants in the stock market who need to learn how to value companies. In 1951, at the age of 21, Warren discovered his mentor, Graham, is on the board of Geico Auto Insurance. He takes a train from New York City to Washington, D.C., and learns firsthand from an executive working on a Saturday all about the direct auto insurance business. This early experience would also help him understand a company that he would one day own in its entirety. That same year, Warren graduated with a master's degree in economics and wanted to work on Wall Street. Both his father, Howard, and his mentor, Graham, urged him not to. Warren offers to work for Ben Graham for free, but Ben Graham refuses, even though Warren is the only student to earn an A+ in security analysis from Graham. Warren jokingly said that his professor did a quick cost-benefit analysis and determined even if he worked for free, it would not be a very good deal. Instead, he returns home and begins dating Susan Thompson, his sister's college roommate. He also purchases a Texaco gas station as a side investment. It doesn't work out as well as he hopes. He begins working as a stockbroker at his father's company, and he begins teaching a night class at the University of Nebraska in Omaha, coincidentally titled Investment Principles. The students were twice his age. In 1952, Warren and Susie got married. It is rumored that he brought along and read the 735-page security analysis during his honeymoon. They rent an apartment for $65 a month and have their first child, also named Susie. Ben Graham called Warren in 1954 and offered the 24-year-old a job at his partnership. Buffett's starting salary was $12,000 a year. 2 years later, Graham decided to retire and folded up his partnership. Since leaving college 6 years earlier, Warren's personal net worth had grown from $9,800 to over $140,000. Amazing for a 26-year-old. He returns home to Omaha and launches a small family and friend limited partnership. This home-based business, with just 7 partners who contributed a total of $105,000. Buffett himself invested only $100. Without a formal office, a secretary, or calculator, the Buffett partnership would earn 29.5% per year over 13 years without ever experiencing a down year. Warren's oldest child and only daughter likes to tell the story that when she was young, she thought her father was in the home alarm business because he worked at home and was in the security business. In 1957, with his wife about to have their 3rd child, Warren purchased a 5-bedroom stucco house on Farnham Street. It cost $31,500, representing 10% of his net worth. He still lives in the same house today. This investment is telling of a would-be billionaire. Save, invest, buy only when it represents 10% of your net worth, instead of what most of us do. While everyone else saves 100% of a 20% down payment and signs up for 30 years of debt for the other 80% we don't own. It's also telling that this home represents Warren's philosophy to buy to keep. He will die owning that home, just as he will die owning his company, Berkshire Hathaway. By age 13, already displaying an insatiable thirst for knowledge, Warren knew that he wanted to be associated with the stock market and declares to a friend of the family that he will be a millionaire by the time he turns 30. He moved with his family to Washington, D.C. for high school while his father served in Congress. He wasn't particularly happy in our nation's capital and yearned for his hometown of Omaha. His loyalty and love of his city of birth would exhibit itself through most of his adult life. He was, by all accounts, an ambitious and industrious teenager. This bi-speckled and crew-cut lad took on 5 newspaper routes and delivered some 500 newspapers. Warren is soon making $175 a month delivering the Washington Post. Just as his early experience with Coke would later serve him well, so too was his boyhood experience with the Washington Post. He would also end up becoming the largest outside owner of the very paper he delivered as a youngster. He also had a used golf ball business. At 14 years old, he invested $1,200 of his savings into 40 acres of Nebraska farmland, which he then leased out. In his senior year of high school, Warren and a good friend, Don Danley, purchased a used pinball machine at an original price of $300 for just $25. As you will learn, this will not be the last time he purchases $1 of assets for less than 10 cents. He has performed this magic his whole life. Their new company was called the Wilson Coin-Operated Machine Company, and the boys strategically placed their machine in nearby Washington, D.C. barbershops. The first night, at 5 cents a play, returned somewhere between $2 and $4, an investment return that has been almost impossible to match. At its peak, the teenagers owned 7 machines placed in different locations and earned $50 a week. The business would be sold later in the year for $1,200 to a war veteran. This experience would later serve him well when 4 decades later he becomes the largest shareholder of one of the world's largest vending machine operators. As a side note, even today, as a gift from a shareholder, Warren has the name of his boyhood vending machine displayed on his auto license plate holder, the Wilson Coin-Operated Machine Company. For Warren's 70th birthday, I was invited along with a group of 12 shareholders to surprise Warren in his office with a replica copy of his first pinball machine. Helping celebrate the occasion was a special guest, Don Danley, Warren's vending machine partner. When Warren walked into his file room, he graciously accepted the pinball machine, took off the front panel to check the tilt, put in a nickel, pulled back the pin, and fired a ball. Artfully, he held the machine and worked the ball past the holes. He then smiled and said the pinball machine was just like his company, Berkshire, that doesn't pay a dividend. You put money in, and you don't get any back, he said. As a side note, not knowing what to get a billionaire for his birthday, I brought along a Dairy Queen ice cream cake, another wholly owned subsidiary, and stopped by the local grocery store to get the candles that you can't blow out. As we lit the candles and sang happy birthday, he realized these candles had an extra spark to them and wasn't about to be fooled. I then produced a hairdryer and said shareholders were concerned about his health, and this might help him blow out his 70 candles. He plugged in the hairdryer, and while almost melting the ice cream cake, extinguished each candle. What a great sense of humor. He graduated in high school by age 16 and had a self-made net worth of $6,000. Also telling, he had already read 100 business books. Even today, he continues to be a ravenous reader and will consume a book in one sitting. His high school yearbook said he was good in math and following in the footsteps of his father would be a future stockbroker. Warren Buffett, with his partners, bought Berkshire in the mid-60s for approximately $10 million. Over the past 3 to 4 decades, he has grown that original investment into $100 billion without adding any additional capital. In this session, we'll talk about the making of a billionaire. This session deals with the timeline of how Warren built his wealth and should be an inspiration to you that you too, following many of the principles and practical methods of Warren Buffett, can build wealth. Maybe Ralph Waldo Emerson said it best. Man was born to be rich or grow rich by the use of his faculties, by the union of thought with nature. Property is an intellectual production. The game requires coolness, right reasoning, promptness, and patience in the players. As this story will tell, Warren Buffett was not born to riches, but was blessed with extraordinary talents. His enduring wealth, created during his lifetime and structured to benefit future generations, was solely developed by intellectual application. He is cool, rational, decisive, and patient. This is a mesmerizing story of a man starting with his own labor without any inheritance and with the constant application of natural talent in a capitalistic system becomes one of the world's wealthiest. So wealthy that it is greater than the gross domestic product of some countries. Warren Edward Buffett was born August 30th, 1930, to parents Howard and Leila Buffett in Omaha, Nebraska. He jokingly says that since his stockbroker father had little to do, he was conceived during the fall of the 1929 stock market crash, and the irrational behavior of investors at that time are now part of his genetic code. Warren has 2 sisters, one older and one younger. He likes to say that he and many of us have won the ovarian lottery with just a 2% probability of being born white, male, and in America. He was gifted with unique skills to value companies, coupled with being born during a time period that would enjoy the greatest economic expansion and would be capitalism's finest hour. One simply cannot overlook the timing of being born right in the middle of a democratic and capitalistic society. He likes to joke about his good friend Bill Gates' suggestion that had he been born a few centuries earlier without the skills to run or hear very well, he would have been some wild animal's lunch. It also was good fortune that Warren's father operated a stock brokerage company in Omaha and later became a U.S. Republican congressman from Nebraska. Although his father left him without an inheritance, he knew he didn't need one. What his father did leave him was an affinity toward stocks, confidence to make his own name, deeply rooted character traits, and natural political savvy that has served him well. He also gave him a deep streak of independence, which Warren demonstrated by selecting a different political party than his father. Both have a frugal nature, but Warren's father was known to be quite serious, and his son could be a stand-up comic. Two books that I have referenced in the development of this series: my friend and longtime yearbook editor Andy Kirkpatrick has written and self-published several editions of Permanent Value, The Story of Warren Buffett. You may enjoy this nearly 1,500-page chronicle of all of Buffett's life. Also, I recommend Roger Lowenstein's biography titled Buffett, The Making of an American Capitalist. By age 6, this early boy merchant, with a family background in a small corner grocery, Warren, possibly through his genetic code, purchased a 6-pack of Coke for 25 cents and sold them individually for a nickel each, setting a lifelong benchmark of a 20% return. Later on, you will learn that this early business venture would stand him well, as he will end up as the largest shareholder of Coca-Cola. He was fascinated with numbers, math, and money. His sisters remember Warren carrying around at a very early age a metal money changer attached to his belt. By age 8, he began reading books about the stock market. 101 Ways to Make $1,000 was an early favorite, and he read it many times. By age 10, this would-be billionaire checked out every book from the local library about investing, finance, and the stock market. Make no mistake about his gifts of memory and the skill with numbers, as evidenced by skipping a grade in elementary school. By June of 1942, at 11 years old, Warren purchased his first stock while marking the board at his father's stock brokerage company. He purchased 6 shares of City Services Preferred, 3 shares for himself, and 3 shares for his older sister Doris, at a cost of $38 per share. The company soon fell to $27, but shortly later climbed back up to $40. Warren sold their stock, but learned an important and early lesson because almost immediately it shot up to over $200 per share. He probably didn't know it at the time, but this experience of selling too soon would become a cornerstone in his investment philosophy. This series comes with no promise of quick wealth, but the opposite promise, that Buffett wealth is created over a lifetime with the careful application of timeless principles. It may surprise you to learn how Warren became the second richest man by investing in other people's companies. He didn't start a business, and he has never managed an operating subsidiary. He hasn't developed or invented any new business, distribution, retail, or technology methods. He holds no patents, and when I asked him at lunch when he plans to write a book, he simply and humbly said, "Everything that needs to be known about investing has already been written." After completing my last book, I put together a quiz titled, "Do you have what it takes to be a Warren Buffett CEO?" I asked Warren at the grand opening of one of his furniture retail stores if I could offer his phone number to the person who won the 10-question quiz. He said sure, but he teased that I should tell the winner to call collect. Hopefully you will be educated and inspired by Warren's investment, financial, and management genius, and entertained by his comedic genius. In that light, I have checkered many Buffett quotes throughout this series in order to educate, inspire, and entertain. Throughout this series, you will learn that Warren has always thought independently and gets no satisfaction from following the crowd. In fact, to build Buffett wealth, you must operate different from everyone else. As Warren is most often quoted, Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful. Investing, he says, is not about IQ. You don't need to be a rocket scientist. Investing is not a game where the guy with 160 IQ beats the guy with 130 IQ. When it comes to building wealth, temperament is far more important than IQ. Rational thinking and conquering your emotions are critical. Open your mind and prepare to learn whole new investment and wealth building methods and philosophies. At the end of each session, we will introduce takeaway exercises, and you might find it useful to follow along with your guidebook. These takeaway exercises will help you develop the same philosophies, principles, and practical methods used by Warren Buffett. The takeaway exercise in this first session and methods as best that I have been able to observe them. And of course, make no promise that you too will be a billionaire simply by listening. The hard work and application is up to you. Now, what this series will do is that I'm reminded of the lady who stood up at a recent Berkshire annual meeting and said, "Mr. Buffett, I only have one B share." And he interrupted her and said, "That's okay, lady. Between you and me, we own half the company. What's your question?" You see, with extraordinary wealth and timeless principles, Warren now has a platform and the opportunity to teach and advance investment education. He points out new ways of looking at investments, proven strategies, rare methods not generally talked about or written about. Instead of old terms like market price, you'll hear new terms like intrinsic value. This series will discuss new ways to look at risk. Warren's world says risk is simply not knowing what you are doing. Long term is any amount of time you are losing money on your investments, is what most people think. To Warren Buffett, long term is forever. And more new terms like Mr. Market, representing wild swings in stock market prices. The difference between growth and value investing, if there is one. And the investment philosophy of Warren's professor of just 20 lifetime investment punches. Ownership over trading, and thoughts from an ancient and wise philosopher some 2,500 years ago. And intelligence over emotion. If you combine the unique skill sets of Warren Buffett, confidence, selecting the right mentors, developing the right principles, having frugality, patience, discipline, independence, and extraordinary work ethic and values, then you too can build Buffett wealth. We'll talk about stocks being unique, and when they are on sale, for some reason they are not appealing. The opposite of a retail merchandise sale or real estate, when they are on sale, most of us jump at it. There are many ways to achieve wealth. The Buffett methods are just one pathway. This program is best for those unfamiliar or with limited knowledge of Warren Buffett and his investment company. It's best for those with limited time to read his writings, available on the internet at berkshirehathaway.com. www.berkshirehathaway.com, all one word, BerkshireHathaway.com. It's best for those who are tired of using principles and methods that have not produced excellent returns and have not built wealth. You will learn that Warren's acquisition policy is the same if you are buying parts of a business through the stock market or if you're buying a business in its entirety, the process is the same. He jokingly says, "It's very scientific. We just sit around and wait for the phone to ring. Sometimes it's the wrong number." This series requires how gifts of memory, genius, and skill at numbers has turned into an amazing wealth-building machine. A timeline of not creating his own business, but rather very shrewd investments in other people's businesses, first in part and then in whole, first through the stock market and then by purchasing them outright. We'll ask the rhetorical question of what kind of investor are you? Are you even an investor? Do others easily influence you, or are you an independent thinker? All investing must start with self-discovery, and the answers to these questions are critical to understanding Buffett's principles and methods. We'll dive into the merits of developing an investment philosophy. Do you know what you own? Warren Buffett does, and he often studies an investment over many decades before he makes a purchase. Many business owners who have sold their business to Warren suggest that he knew more about their business than the owner and founder of the business. This wealth program will showcase the idea of investing in Main Street rather than Wall Street. Your focus must be on business and their valuations, not on markets. Contrary to most advice you will get from your financial advisor, we'll discuss the merits of concentrating your investments in a few stocks and buying to keep, maybe even a lifetime. And then we'll see what we can learn by exploring Warren Buffett's investment mistakes. We'll explore investment, wealth, and Buffett myths. Just what are the 5 investment principles of the next Warren Buffett? I think you will find him to be a unique and independent thinker. And my favorite session, the lessons about life. We can't discuss wealth without also exploring character, integrity, reputation, and thriftiness. This may disappoint you or warm your heart, but the second richest man lives no better than the average college student. He just travels better. As a disclaimer, I am not authorized, compensated, selected, or approved by Warren Buffett. I do not speak for him, but merely share my observations as a keen observer. As a courtesy, and as is my customary practice, I sent an outline of this series in advance to him, and after production, a finished album. I've been in his company several times, including 2 visits to his office, a delightful and spirited 2-hour lunch, a 45-minute phone conversation, and many letters. He is so disciplined and focused that he read my 400-page book in one sitting. It should be noted that I am a long-term shareholder of his company. I have never been employed by Berkshire or any of its subsidiaries, but have had the good fortune to have met and interviewed most of the Buffett CEOs. I am not a registered investment advisor, and certainly no substitute for one. I am not licensed, so I can't offer stock-picking advice. I have nothing to gain or lose if you follow the advice in this program. There are no ongoing products to purchase. Hopefully, you will find me just the way I am. Maybe like you, a 40-something-year-old private investor who made 30 years' worth of investing mistakes, then discovered the methods of the world's greatest. And now on to how this series was born. Not too long ago, several members of the media and the investment community were writing off Warren's investment principles and style as not being in step with technology investments and new methods of investing. His was old economy, and the action and the money to be made was in the new economy stocks. Time proved Warren right. Now more than ever, his principles, values, and methods used to create Buffett wealth are sought after and carefully considered. It was always there in his writings and his speeches, and in his professors' writings and teachings before him. The purpose of this series is to help define the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Stephen Swid wrote, "Being rich is having money. Being wealthy is having time." Rich can be temporary in nature and oftentimes is fleeting. An example of how transient riches can be is to look at how we use it in our vocabulary. Typically, we use the word to describe a rich dessert, and when it is gone, so is the rich flavor. Wealth is an abundance of resources, education, and knowledge. This series is intended to be more than how to become rich. Instead, we will focus on the factors and principles of becoming wealthy, creating it, sustaining it, and passing it on to future generations for the betterment of society. Even if you adopt some or all of these wealth principles, Warren said it best: money will not change how healthy you are or how many people love you. It's important also to point out what this audio series won't do. There are no get-rich-quick schemes or promises. Instead, this is a get-rich-slow program. Remember in Proverbs, "He that maketh haste to be rich shall not be innocent." You will learn that it has taken Warren a lifetime to build wealth for himself and his partners, and so too will it take you. There are no ethical shortcuts. This program does not contain specific, the latest, or any hot stock picks. In 1987, in Money magazine, Warren was quoted as saying, "There's no reason in the world you should expect some broker to be able to tell you whether you can make money on index futures or options or some stock in 2 months. If he knew how to do that, he wouldn't be talking to investors. He would have retired long ago." So there are no special secrets because Warren has employed none. It is simple, but I'm sorry to say it is not easy. There are no complicated strategies, no unethical principles. Good profits can indeed come from good behavior as proven by Warren. There will be no typical promises of vast wealth and riches or lifestyle dreams to those who listen. If you simply underspend your income and buy $1 of assets for 50 cents, you too will be sufficiently wealthy over a long lifetime. Let me give you a little background about me. My name is Bob Miles, and I started first as a student of investing. Maybe, like you, I became a private investor, or should I say, a trader, and made all the classic investment mistakes. I managed to graduate from one of the top business schools in the country without learning about Warren Buffett. After 30 years of making all the wrong investment moves, I finally asked myself, who is the best at investing, and what can I learn from him? The answer, of course, was Warren Buffett, and I became an avid student of everything he had to say and everything he had to write. I purchased his stock, and when he first offered the B shares, I attended the annual meeting in May and now have more than doubled my investment. You might find it interesting as to how I came about writing about Warren Buffett. I thought the man was so profound and his company so profound that I could come up with 101 reasons why you should own it. And over a period of 101 days, on the internet, on the Motley Fool discussion boards, I posted a new, unique reason to own his company. The fact that he's the only stock to issue an owner's manual and hosts the largest annual meeting of any other publicly traded company with some 15,000 shareholders the first Saturday of May descend on Omaha, Nebraska, representing every state in the Union and also several foreign countries. When I finished my work, I sent a letter to Warren asking his permission to publish my work of 101 Reasons to Own the World's Greatest Investment. And he answered me within a few days that it would be okay to publish the book, and I did. And as a real honor, he purchased 10 copies of it to give to his board of directors. When I finished the book, I had to think of a way to get it into the hands of shareholders. So I offered free ice cream Friday night in Omaha, Nebraska at the Dairy Queen. And Berkshire Hathaway shareholders know a good value when they see it. And they showed up in large numbers where we had standing room only. But what was a real treat is that Warren Buffett also showed up because he too knows a good value when he sees it. I then was published in hardcover by a New York publisher who was in attendance that day, and then traveled the country interviewing some 20 CEOs that all report to Warren Buffett, and wrote The Warren Buffett CEO. When I finished that manuscript, I was invited out to Omaha to speak at a personal investment conference, and I got a phone call from Warren Buffett's secretary who said that Warren would like to take me to lunch. I said that I was busy, but I quickly changed my plans and made myself available and had a delightful 2-hour lunch with Warren where we talked about a whole variety of subjects. And then when we finished, I gave him my 400-page manuscript, and he read it in one sitting, and then called me at 6:50 a.m. the following morning to point out that he only found 6 factual errors, and he didn't think that was too bad for 400 pages. I now enjoy traveling the country, sharing my passion about this man and this business. This past spring, I hosted another Omaha Dairy Queen reception where Warren showed up and sat down and signed copies of my book. And as an interesting side note, he has security guards helping him during the annual meeting weekend. And one of the security guards leaned over and whispered something to Warren, and I thought it must be some high-level information. And later I found out that the security guard was just taking Warren Buffett's Dairy Queen order, a dusty Sunday. I now frequently write articles and travel the country as a professional speaker, giving presentations similar to this one on the management and investment principles and practical methods of Warren Buffett, without question, the world's greatest investor. It may fascinate you to learn that as Warren made himself a billionaire and one of the world's richest men, he also created enormous wealth for his partners and shareholders. For every dollar in wealth he created for himself, his family, and his foundation, he has created 2 additional dollars in wealth for others. And what a great lesson that will prove to be. without the benefit of inheritance, created abundant wealth, and plans to give it all back to society. This is the introduction of how to build wealth like Warren Buffett, principles and practical methods used by the world's greatest investor. Welcome. My name is Bob Miles, and I have created this series to tell you the audio story of the only man to become a billionaire by investing in the stock market. By investing in other people's businesses, first in part and then eventually in whole, by acquiring wholly owned subsidiaries. As the author of 2 books and numerous speeches, this is a favorite topic and passion of mine, and I hope of yours when you complete this series. You may learn investment lessons, but also character and life lessons. Although this is a program about building wealth, it is impossible to showcase the principles and practical methods without speaking about character issues. To paraphrase the English philosopher James Allen, circumstances define you, and you attract not what you want, but rather what you are. Just because you want wealth doesn't mean you will become wealthy. You must have the character traits and principles as a guideline to attract what you are. Warren Buffett has created more millionaires and billionaires than any other public or private investment manager, business executive, or conglomerate. He has attracted what he is. Maybe you have heard about the charitable auctions, where some have paid up to $25,000 to go to lunch with Warren. One fellow paid over $200,000 for his wallet that included a stock tip. Another group paid at charitable auction $600,000 for a round of golf with Tiger Woods, which included Warren Buffett as the caddy. Maybe you heard the story. They teed off with Warren wearing a caddy uniform with Woods' name on the back. On the 18th tee, Tiger, one of the world's best golfers, proposed a bet to Warren, the world's best investor. He suggested a $5 bet and gave Warren, who was not playing, a 2-stroke advantage. Careful with his investments and his bets, Warren accepted after Tiger offered to play the last hole on his knees. After Warren's modest drive off the tee, Tiger knelt down and drove his ball some 250 yards right down the middle of the fairway. Warren's second shot found water, and needless to say, Tiger won the bet. The moral of the story is if you want to beat Tiger, play him in anything but golf. Afterwards, Warren was asked if he would ever take the same bet with Tiger. He said he would, as long as Tiger gave him 2 strokes, played on his knees, and played blindfolded. The lesson for all of us is to study the best. Warren studies the best in every field of endeavor, and is the best when it comes to building wealth by owning other people's businesses. Study the best to be the best, and that's exactly what you are doing with this series. He is known as a value investor and a values manager. Fortunately, he is able to choose exactly those people he likes, admires, respects, and trusts to work with. As I will share, he invests in value enterprises, but not without a values manager. He encourages his people to do first-class business in a first-class way. Buffett's conglomerate, Berkshire Hathaway, is publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange and is now the 25th largest employer with over 140,000 employees. His NetJet subsidiary can be considered the 6th largest private airline, based on the number of corporate jets under management. All of this, and with no large headquartered building, no large staff, no options, no funny accounting, no yachts, no Rolls Royces, no mansions or typical trappings of wealth. One of the longest CEO tenures of 37 years and counting is enjoyed by Warren Buffett. To give you a perspective of Warren's investment record, consider in the last century the Dow Jones Industrial Average went from 66 to 11,000. The NASDAQ, born in 1971, went from 100 to close the century at approximately 2,000. Berkshire Hathaway, with Warren Buffett's leadership and management, has added 1 zero every decade since acquiring it first in 1962. The stock has gone up from 7 to 70 to 700 to 7,000 to over $70,000. It's now the highest priced stock of any stock on any stock exchange in the world, and he's proud of it. Following his passion and doing exactly what he was born to do, Warren does not believe in retirement. He says that he will retire 5 years after his death. Asking him to name a replacement and retire would be like asking Picasso to stop painting. Berkshire is his masterpiece. And he has inspired other master business artists to hang their business masterpieces in his Berkshire Museum and to continue painting. He owns outright over 100 wholly owned businesses, from Dairy Queen to World Book to Geico Auto Insurance. He also owns over $30 billion in stocks, including Coca-Cola, American Express, and Gillette. His job is simply to bring paint and brushes. He offers no advice unless asked, and he promises that the master business paintings will not be merged or painted over. Today, Warren Buffett's net worth is $36 billion.